Hey everybody, welcome to Two Out the First. I'm Ryan Ballantyne. It's great to have you here with us for our daily rundown of the two biggest stories in golf. We have a couple of topics for you today, building off of a little bit of yesterday's show where we talked about John Rahm and trying to make a deal between LIV and the DP World Tour and all the drama around that. But this kind of ties into it in a little bit of a different way, and it is all kind of connected and interesting. So we'll bring it full circle there. And then we're going to talk about the horrific TV ratings from the weekend for both LIV and the PGA Tour, how that's connected to the PGA Tour fall moving forward, and what that could mean for how we consume golf as fans of professional golf. So, first, let's start with Rory McIlroy. He's playing in the DP World Tour's flagship event this week, the BMW PGA Championship. The Wentworth event is the biggest on their schedule, even though they might tell you the DP World Tour Championship in Dubai is a bigger tournament because they hand out the bonus money, but this is by far their biggest tournament. It's their best. It's right at their headquarters. McIlroy's building a custom home, not too far away from Wentworth in England. He's moving, at least going to try and have more of a base in England moving forward than Florida. So he's there, obviously, to support the DP World Tour as a guy who's been a long backer of the tour. And he went to the news center, the media center did a news conference to talk about state of play, his game. He had a close call last week at the Irish Open, almost got it done, but couldn't get it done. Lost to the Højgaards, well, Rasmus, but lost to the Højgaard family at Royal County Down. And he was asked about a bevy of subjects because he's been the face of golf for a number of years now, going back to this entire LIV Golf, PIF, PGA Tour, DP World Tour, Super League mess, right? Premier Golf League mess over the last few years. And McIlroy was asked about the negotiations between the PGA Tour and the Public Investment Fund as it relates to potentially getting to a deal. Again, they had negotiations in New York over September 11th, which was not the brightest move. His Excellency, Andrew Waterman / Yasser Al-Rumayyan was not there, but their teams seem to have made progress. And Bloomberg talked about this in a story saying that they believe one of the bigger stumbling blocks, according to their sources, was that John Rahm's $300 million LIV contract was something that PGA Tour players wanted to claw back in either total or in penalties or moving forward, and that was a big sticking point. And then Joel Beal from Golf Digest, who's pretty well sourced on this stuff too, he tweeted about it, as did Eamon Lynch from Golf Week, who's pretty well sourced on all these types of things. Both of them sent tweets that were conflicting with that idea. And Joel said, hey, the Rahm clawback thing isn't necessarily a big stumbling block. It's what to do with LIV Golf moving forward. And you can't just get rid of LIV because the Department of Justice will say you are being anti-competitive, and the old Jay Monahan comment of taking a competitor off the board. So if you do that, then you are being anti-competitive. They could veto the deal. They could prevent it from happening in the first place. So that's one big piece of it. So Joel says, hey, LIV's going to have to continue on in some fashion. It might be relegated to a unique series, a team series or something like that, but it can't just go away entirely because it needs DOJ approval. And then maybe 5 years down the line, it goes away or something like that, right? You make promises to the feds to get the deal approved, and then you can renege on those just as soon as, everything's consummated. And then Eamon Lynch wrote a column about it too. Similar sentiments. There has been progress toward a deal. One could be, at least the outlines of a deal could be announced in the coming weeks. But again, it all really comes down to, what are you going to do to reintegrate LIV Golf into the PGA Tour ecosystem, and whatever that looks like, while also confronting the reality that the PGA Tour really probably only wants 3 or 4 players back from LIV Golf. They want John Rahm, right? He's an active 2-time major winner, obviously a great player, obviously some guy that's got a long career ahead of him and can be a star of the game. Then you've got Brooks Koepka, right? 5-time major winner. And I think a player a lot of folks connect with in some fashion, whether you love him or hate him. He is a needle mover and gets people's attention. And he has been the proxy for LIV, rightly or wrongly, in this existence of LIV, because he is the player that won a major first while being on LIV. So he's thought of as the guy that went to LIV and did better for himself. And that is true. And then you've got Bryson DeChambeau, who, while there are plenty of people who probably don't like him personally, you can't deny that he has transformed himself into a star. And that was manifest in winning the US Open and how crowds pulled for him and how they've drawn attention to him with his YouTube content, political or not political, but that he has brought himself an audience and brings an audience back to the PGA Tour. Those are really the only three players that the PGA Tour would really like to have back, right? Most of the others are in decline or they weren't big stars to begin with. I think you could throw Cam Smith in that group. I think you could throw Tyrrell Hatton in that group if you were being candid and thorough in your analysis, because Cam Smith's a major winner, had a great year 2 years ago, has not really followed up on that especially well, but is a major winner. And Tyrrell Hatton is undisputably a top 25 player in the world. And I think you'd be hard pressed to say you don't want that guy back. But nevertheless, what McIlroy said today I thought was particularly interesting in that he identified some stumbling blocks with this potential deal, right? And one of them he identified clearly is the Department of Justice. And there are thoughts that these sides are keeping the DOJ aware of their negotiation to see if they could kind of get as much of a thumbs up as possible before a deal is made as you could possibly get from a federal regulatory body. And the other big stumbling block is the players on both sides. And I thought that was the most interesting thing. He spoke it out. He said it. And I think a lot of people know that to be true if you follow this stuff day to day and hardcore. But the reality is, and as he laid it out, probably half the players on both the tours don't ever want there to be a deal. And we've talked about it from the LIV Golf players' perspective over the years. There isn't much of an incentive to have a deal with the PGA Tour, because if that means LIV as you understand it goes away, there goes the gravy train. There goes a free $50,000 per event played. And if you aren't in the bottom five, there goes a free $120,000 per event played, right? For a 13 event season, that's a lot of guaranteed money. And all you have to do is beat the five worst players to make over $1 million a year. That gravy train goes away if LIV goes away, because it's not going to be the way that it was. So there's plenty of incentive for those middling players, those players who are on 1 year deals, year-to-year deals, 2-year deals, to keep the competition away and keep LIV there. It is a gravy train of money for them, and it's the reason they took it, and it's the reason they're going to stay with it. On the PGA Tour side, you have players who don't want to deal for a different reason, but also a same reason. They're keeping those guys out. They keep the 10 people who are the best players on that LIV Golf Tour from being on the PGA Tour or the DP World Tour and competing in those events with them. That's taking out potential competition, so to speak, and enhancing yourself at the same time, because you get access potentially to the signature events, to the money in the FedEx Cup playoffs. All that stuff can work in your favor by keeping just those 10 guys out. Makes your life a little bit easier, right? And also keeping out those kind of middling guys who could be competition for your spot is a good thing for them. And also, there are a lot of guys on the PGA Tour side who are not happy with the players who went to LIV. They wanted to pay back whatever they got guaranteed. They wanted to pay back what they've earned. And that stuff's never going to happen. That will never in a million years happen. We talked about it yesterday. No player who got a guaranteed sum from LIV is going to say, oh, I'm so happy to be back at the PGA Tour. Here is the money that I've probably already spent that I got from the Saudis for taking on the reputational damage, all of the issues that came along with being on LIV. That's just not going to happen. So there's that piece of all of this. So I think you got McIlroy kind of being real here, and I think he's been pretty real about himself the entire time. He's always said, "I don't care for LIV. I don't care for it. I want it to go away. Even if it were a deal, I want LIV to go away. I want Greg to go away. Greg Norman, that is. All of those things have been his opinion the entire time. Now, his views on how players might need to be accepted has changed too, because of the reality that the Saudis aren't going anywhere yet, and they've spent billions of dollars, and they intend to spend billions more. So why not spend that money with the PGA Tour? That's his rationalization. And maybe that's how his view has evolved, but he's kind of more or less said the entire time, you want to spend billions of dollars, do it with what we've got. Don't make something new and mess everything up that we've got. So interesting comments from McIlroy. I think that's a pretty fair state of play here in these negotiations. They're inching towards some kind of agreement, but it's really hard to represent the interests of a constituency, especially on the PGA Tour side, because you're representing the players. But it's really hard to represent a constituency when more than half of them arguably don't want the deal you're negotiating in any shape or form. So how are you going to have a happy constituency when you come back to them and half of them automatically say, we don't like it? I mean, that's electoral politics in the United States. You go, okay, well, Donald Trump's president, 50% thumbs down. Kamala Harris is president, 50% thumbs down. I mean, that is where we are in terms of this negotiation. You're guaranteed to have just about half of the people involved unhappy with the result, if there is one, either way. And that's a tough negotiating place for the PGA Tour. That's a tough negotiating place for the Saudis, because they know they're not going to be welcomed with open arms from everybody. And that there's a high percentage of PGA Tour players who are just happy enough to say, we've got the strategic sports group money. It could be $3 billion. It's all we need. Let's get out of here and never deal with this again. So very interesting to hear those comments from McIlroy, kind of lay it all bare. And I think he's kind of reached the point where he's very sick of talking about this and just wants something to get done. But he knows there are so many stumbling blocks in making that happen. All right, our second topic today. It's been a rough weekend for golf professionally on television. The numbers came out for the television viewing, the Nielsen figures on TV side for the LIV Golf event in Chicago, and for the PGA Tour's kickoff event to the fall, the Pro Court Championship. The numbers on Sunday were extremely bad. So shout out to Josh Carpenter from Sports Business Journal, who shares these ratings every week. Every once in a while you see him from Sports TV ratings, but Josh has been the bellwether, the guy that Bedrock has been showing these over the last several months. There's some issue with Nielsen subscriptions and the sites that have been using it, but Josh has got the numbers. So let's start with LIV. 89,000 folks for the final round. 89,000 folks on the CW on TV in the final round. Now, it was about 40-ish thousand people higher on Saturday. Obviously, once football starts, people become kind of disinterested, and they're going to watch football above all else, right? And so that is kind of to be expected, that you see an enormous drop, 40,000 person drop, 30% drop from Saturday to Sunday, regardless, right? Although college football Saturdays are great too. So maybe not quite the same audience overlap from LIV and the PGA Tour. Maybe people who watch LIV are bigger professional football fans than they are college football fans. I don't know, just guessing at that. But 89,000 is really bad, because more people attend a lot of college football games in one spot for 3 hours in an afternoon than in the entire country of 330 million people watch LIV Golf on the CW, which is available at pretty much every home in the United States. That's bad. Somehow, the PGA Tour rating was even lower. 69,000 people for the final round for the Pro Court Championship out in Napa, California. That is a 77% drop from last year's final round, when Sahith Theegala won what was then a different tournament known as the Fortinet Championship. Still same venue, same kickoff to the fall season. But the numbers of a 77% drop seem so much more jarring. And frankly, they are, compared to LIV's numbers, which we know are kind of hovering in the 130 to 50,000 range on a good round, and closer to the 100,000 range on a not so good round, not so football influenced round. So we know what LIV's ratings are. We know what they are. We know what it brings to the table or doesn't bring to the table. We know that the folks who watch LIV and are big cheerleaders of on social media go, but we only watch it on the app. So you're very dramatically undercounting our audience. And maybe all of that's true. I doubt it. But also on the PGA Tour side, they have plenty of streaming options, right? They've got PGA Tour Live with ESPN Plus included, and a lot of people have ESPN Plus, not just for golf, but for everything. And then also there's the international streaming stuff that's available too through, Golf TV. So there are a bunch of different options available for streaming for the PGA Tour. We never hear those numbers either. But 69,000 compared to like 278,000 or whatever it was, 298,000 the year before, is very bad. And there is some context to include to that, right? That Sahith Theegala was going for his first win. He is a popular player. He had some competition. He had 4 to 5 challengers that made the final round interesting. That wasn't really the case for Patton Kizzire, who was well ahead going into the final round. No one was even within 5 shots very early on Sunday. It was kind of a cakewalk, even though it got a little tight there, but he walked away in the end with a pretty easy victory for his first win, 6 years, something like that on the PGA Tour. Third win, great for Patton Kizzire. but blowouts don't do well. And as I mentioned on Twitter too, um, I forget who I responded to, but when you have a blowout, typically on a PGA Tour event, you lose kind of 15-20% of your audience right off the bat. They want to see something close. They don't want to see a crowning or a runaway, typically speaking. So ratings go down when those things happen. But that only explains a little bit. And also, you could take Sahith Theegala not being a part of it in the final equation, and you could take away a little bit of that. But to take away 77% of the audience from the year prior, there's a lot more going on there. And you can kind of see that reflected in the money available through the fall. Handful of the events that are in the fall schedule have lower purses this year than last year. And this one is the most dramatic cut of them all. About a $2.5 million cut in purse from the year prior when Fortinet was the sponsor to Procore now being the sponsor, which they got installed as the sponsor in July, and they put up a $6 million purse compared to like $8.3 million last year. This is the future of the fall. This is the reality of the fall. And this is the reality of the fall as it was before it became part of the wraparound schedule. And even, frankly, as part of it. And now I think the PGA Tour has to grasp from a business perspective, and they're fighting with it now, that the fall does not have much of a draw. And if there's not much of a draw, there's not going to be much money. If there's not going to be great players, there's not going to be good viewing. But also add into all of that the way we are consuming content is changing dramatically. And you can see it reflected in the fact that I'm doing a live stream and having a TV network that's available through streaming platforms, right? There are different ways to consume content more than ever. And that used to be running in parallel to the most dominant form of content consumption that we have, which is television. But that has been eroded. And now we are in a world where content consumption on TV has fallen precipitously. And it's not just this, although not to this extent. But if you look at the TV ratings for any given night of the week, and I know that's very nerdy stuff to do, but if you go and look at it, the winning broadcast on a night is like 4 million people. And years ago used to be even as high, like 8 million. Within my adult lifetime, it used to be like 10, 12 million. Back when I was a kid, it used to be like 20 million people watched the show. That was a big deal on network TV. Now, with all of the options available, with younger generations rejecting TV, especially paid subscription TV, there are just fewer people who can watch this stuff or are willing to watch this stuff. And that comes at the expense of golf because there are fewer people who are paying for cable TV and satellite TV and streaming TV packages that have Golf Channel. And that distribution has gone down dramatically. So it reduces your available audience. Then add in the fact that golf's audience tends to be older. Those people are less likely to follow Golf Channel to whatever the next technology is. So if they cut the cord and get rid of cable, they're not going to find Golf Channel. And if the event is not on network TV, they're not finding it. And I think that's a big problem for the PGA Tour's viewership figures, but it's an equally big problem for the rights owner who has to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to the PGA Tour for a product that has changed rapidly in the last several years and doesn't give them the same pop that they had even just a few years ago. They're effectively just bleeding money to have the fall portion of the PGA Tour schedule on Golf Channel. And I don't say this with joy or fun or anything. It stinks. It stinks for them. It's going to have a trickle-down effect on their business. It's going to have a trickle-down effect on a lot of different things and people that rely on this. And this is an unintended consequence of everything that has happened the last several years, that people lose their jobs, livelihoods, budgets get cut, things that were going well don't go well anymore. It's a problem, and it's not a good one to have. There are some good problems to have. This is not a good one to have, and it's unfortunate that this is the reality. One final thing before we go today, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it. There's an interesting story from Ryan French at Monday Q Info, and you should subscribe to his site. He's great, mondayqinfo.com. Has like 200,000 followers on X. Tells some awesome, incredible stories. But he is in Cincinnati this week to caddy for the LPGA Tour's Kroger Queen City Championship. He's caddying with Christina Kim. I've had the pleasure of getting to know over the years. And one thing he pointed out that was very interesting to me was that the yardage book situation in Cincinnati is not great. The yardage books that are made available at tournaments they're made available for the course hosting that week. We have a new course this year hosting this event, TPC Rivers Bend, instead of the prior host. And the problem with that is they've run out of yardage books early on in the week. And so caddies weren't able to get yardage books universally for players. And that means delaying their preparations for a day, their note taking, extending that by a day. This is a tough situation. It's something that can be remedied, can be remedied with a sponsor, can be remedied with I guess, a better relationship with the yardage book makers. But I was really disappointed to hear that. So I'm hoping that in this universe, someone sees Ryan's reporting or hears this conversation and maybe can step up and offer yardage books, even digital yardage books would be better. And that simple app development, and maybe that's the way that this goes. Get digital yardage books in front of caddies so they can at least on their phones use a stylus and write notes and put it in a digital yardage book. Free business idea to anyone who wants it, but unfortunate that it came to that so far early this week in Cincinnati. That's going to do it for us today on the show. Thanks so much for spending some time with me. I appreciate it. We will be back tomorrow with another show, and you can catch the show every day on Golf News Net TV. Head over to golfnewsnet.com, click on the GNN TV button. You can watch unabated in beautiful full screen view over there at golfnewsnet.com, where you can find it on every single article on our site. And we'll have more news in the coming weeks as we get connected to more of our streaming partner platforms. Lots to come on that front. Thanks so much for watching 2 Out the First. We will be with you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.